Good morning, my name is Brian Fox and you're very welcome here to the Friday Forum. On today's panel is Fine Gael Councillor Josepha Madigan. She's on the Dún Laoghaire County Council, and Shane Keneally, who is a parliamentary assistant. If you want to contact the show, the phone number is 2960939, text number is 0879392000, and the email address is fridayforumdsfm@gmail.com. And to contact us on Twitter, it's at FridayForumDSFM, and the same address for our Facebook page. A reminder that the show is podcast about an hour. We go off air, and it's available on the station's website, dublinsouthfm.ie. And if you're having any problems with reception, you can listen to us on your smartphone using the TuneIn radio app. So thanks, Shane, for coming in again. You're a regular contributor to the show, and thank you for coming in.
Thanks for the invite.
And congratulations, Josepha, on your new title of councillor.
Thank you very much.
It's nice to see you. And tell us something of your background. You are representing the Stillorgan ward, correct?
Correct, yes.
And what attracted you to politics? Because before we go into your family background, let's just ask you. What made you go up for election in the first place?
Brian, I think a lot of politicians fall into politics without ever really deciding to enter politics, and I think kind of politics found me more than the other way around. In fact, when my dad, as you know, was Paddy Madigan, he was a Fianna Fáil councillor, and eventually he was an independent. And if anything, looking at him being involved in politics, it would have put me off. And I remember distinctly as a child crying when Dad lost an election and saying, I'm never, ever, ever getting into politics. And seeing even the dirty tactics that goes on at a local level, I swore to myself then, I'm never getting involved. But as you get older and as you see how the country is and the skills that you have acquired, you know, particularly as I've been a family lawyer for 17 years, I've represented, you know, legal aid clients and people who are in a lot of difficulty. I just felt that I'd have something to offer, and I hope that I will. I'm still learning. I'm only a newly elected councillor, and I have a lot to learn. There's no handbook as such when you start in politics, but certainly my integrity is there, and I do want to try and make a difference.
Now, just from the point of view of your background, you mentioned your father there, my commiserations on his passing as well. I do remember him as being, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years. How long was he an independent?
He was 14 years a councillor from my memory anyway, and I think it was about 4 or 5 years where he's an independent. He resigned from Fianna Fáil ultimately, and he ran as an independent also. So, you know, a lot of people, and I'm sure you're going to ask me yourself, say to me, how did I end up a Fine Gael councillor?
I know. What happened there?
Well, you know, I was never a member of Fianna Fáil myself, and I suppose there's this dynasty sort of political thing in Ireland, you know, in particular, where we follow in the footsteps of our parents. But, you know, I was going to say I was very privileged to have a good education, which opens your own mind to make your own decisions about what politics suit you. And certainly with Fianna Fáil and some of the decisions they've made, I just couldn't be part of that. And
can you give us, what sort of decisions would you?
Well, they destroyed the country as far as I'm concerned. You know, and we're trying to, in government, we're trying to pick up the pieces from that. I mean, back when this recession started, if you like, in 2008, and the bailout and all of those things, and I know we're going to discuss some of that later, when my children were a little bit older, back in 2011, I canvassed in the general election for Fine Gael, and I decided that I can't just sit back anymore and have Fianna Fáil in government again. And then I became involved, and then as most...
What was your father's reaction? Because, I mean, how recently...
Oh, he was my biggest supporter. He was absolutely my biggest fan. And the strange thing is that people have said to me, and how is your dad feeling about you running for Fine Gael? Yeah. He was the sort of person... I mean, Dad was a very kind of... maverick, if you like, as you know, and had his own mind. So in a sense, he suited being an independent.
He wasn't afraid
to say that.
There,
exactly, and he encouraged of his conviction. And I think he saw in me, not saying a spark of himself, but you know, he. In a sense, it's not that the party was irrelevant to my dad, but I think he knew that I would bring and do my best in whatever party I was with. In fact, he was nearly more Fine Gael than Fianna Fáil at the end, really. Now, my mother she said she'd rather I converted to Islam than joined Fine Gael, so that was a difficult conversation. But, you know, I think even I have children myself, I think everybody has to make their own decision about what party they want to be involved in. So
just prior to the general election then that you decided to become involved with Fine Gael?
I became involved God, I canvassed. I said, I'm not sitting on the armchair anymore. I'm going to get up and do something. I just saw people on their knees, just with no money in their pockets. And so I canvassed, and then I continued on attending branch meetings, and then continued on going to constituency meetings, never ever with the intention of getting into politics myself. As I said earlier, it was the last thing I expected to be doing. But I was approached to run. I originally said no because I had a lot of considerations, running my own practice, etc. And then I said, well, we need to get some good people in there, and I decided to do it, and I don't regret it.
Mm-hmm. Shane, just turn to you. You ran as an independent yourself in the Temple Oak Tenure constituency or ward constituency?
I think it's local electoral area now. I think ward is generally.
Yeah. There you go. You fought a tough fight and you did well in the
group
end.
of death.
My commiserations on not making, but just like tell us your experiences out there while you were. What was your reaction to you as an independent?
As an independent, I mean, the reaction I got was great. What kind of stymied me was really just the manpower. Like, an awful lot of my friends and family at this point would have emigrated. So running as an independent, I was literally calling in anybody and everybody I knew to try and give me a hand to get it. So I knew that at best, given the resources I had available to me, I could pull about 1,000 votes, and I got almost 1,100. And I figured if I got that much, I'd be running in, contesting for the 6th seat with 2 others. And that's exactly where I found myself in the end. So it didn't break my way, but that's politics, And
again, I mean, I know, from knowing you that you were politically aligned in the past. Just from a listener point of view, would you just tell listeners why you decided to go independent as opposed to go with a party?
Well, when I was kind of young and foolish, I was involved with Fianna Fáil, and later I would have worked for Conor Lenihan. Which gave me a great experience of politics in Ireland, but I think that there's something deeply wrong with the culture of the political parties in Ireland, and I don't think it's specific to any one party. Like, I work in the Oireachtas now for an independent, and I can see the corrosiveness of the party whip. It really stymies the development of individual politicians of greatness, I think, in the country, because what happens is those who do get elected to the Oireachtas, they arrive in there, they get told to shut up, put up and press the button, and their voice counts for very little. Certainly that's my experience, and as an observer in there for the last few years, I think that the thing that we need most to change in Irish politics is this hard whip. Like, last year, the British voted on whether they should go to war with Syria. Now, we see what the mess Syria is in at the moment. Mm-hmm. I don't think that throwing in extra missiles and drones to that would have made it a better kind of mess. Mm-hmm. But what happened in Britain was 37 members of the Conservative Party revolted against their leader and did not vote for war. And exactly none of them lost their jobs. None of them were thrown out of their parties. And they probably made the right decision. Britain probably made the right decision, and their Prime Minister was making the wrong decision in the action he was trying to take. That's what happens when individual politicians can use their own initiative. And what we have here is a system which tends to prevent individual politicians from using their initiative. And by the time I think that someone does get into power, I mean, if you saw the ministers who were let go last week, but separately, just very briefly, I mean, so many of them have been around for so very, very long, and they had been sitting in parties for decades at sometimes without ever actually wielding any power or having the opportunity to make a decision. So training them out of making decisions is something which isn't useful to our political system. So that's why I ran as an independent. I'm probably too forthright to be
radical,
comfortable within a party.
Maverick,
yeah. Well, what was your reaction now to what Shane has said?
Yeah,
in those terms now, being a party.
Yeah.
Getting. I don't want to go into national forum now in terms of the whip and so forth, but just at local level, would you?
There's no party whip on the local.
No,
at the local council. So I'm not.
Because we go into
and I understand and I appreciate what Shane is saying, and I respect him actually running at all in politics as an independent, because it's very difficult. And I remember that from my dad, getting the manpower and everything. So well done to you in doing so well. And 1,100 votes is an awful lot of votes to get, With regard to the party whip, this is one of the reasons why, you can't do anything from the outside. You have to do it from the inside out. And if we get people like us, whether you're independent, whether you're a party or whatever, the more of us younger people, and you're probably younger than I am, but to get into politics and to make these changes and to get cross-party support to do that, we can do that. Because you're right, the difficulty is, and I can see it on the council, I'm only there like a month or two, that, it's very difficult to change the system the way it is. You have to play the game. There's no point. And I see some new, fresh-faced, if you like, very young councillors coming in their 20s, excuse me, expecting to change the world, expecting to, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And, it's not a cynical, viewpoint, but it's knowing that we can only do so much. So you can only do so much until you get a little bit further and try and make those real policy decisions.
But Josepha, can I just come in on that? Because there's a lot of cynicism about local politics at the moment because of the fact that most people see power being based in the Custom House, from the point of view of local government and indeed other departments as well. So from the point of view of you going into a local council and trying to do what your vision is within the council, does seem to a large degree to many people pointless.
No, it's definitely not pointless, Brian. I mean, one thing that I very much welcome is already we have had unanimous support for a lot of motions on the council that some of the councillors have brought. So one was, for example, the proposed closure of the courts in Dún Laoghaire. We had a unanimous motion to against that. So that was one thing.
But still, that's on the shelf at the moment. I mean, how effective will your say be in that?
But then it's kind of about lobbying. I know that we managed to prevent the High Court, Family Law Court, moving to Blanchardstown when there was enough lobbying by councillors and by solicitors groups, etc. So it's the same thing. Fingal County Council have also come on board about that. Yeah, we've also reduced the property tax, that, by 15%. Yeah. That received unanimous support. There were other motions, for example, Letty McCarthy, who I have the utmost respect for as a Labour councillor, brought a motion to invite Prince William and Duchess Catherine to Dún Laoghaire. Now that received, I don't know if any votes were in favour of that because people felt, well, look, Dún Laoghaire needs housing. We need, this is ridiculous. We don't have the money for this, Yeah. So I do think most of the people, if not the majority of the councils that I have met on the council, are well intentioned, and we can pass motions that make a difference, definitely. Yeah.
Shane, what's your feeling about local councils at the moment? I think the last time you were in here, you were kind of well, I'll let you speak for yourself, but would you take my point in that in recent developments with the number of councillors now being elected, that within themselves they are quite powerless?
Yes, I mean, very little power is vested in the councillors of the moment. I mean, the primary responsibility that they have is managing the budget of the council. So what I'd love to see is more councillors actually digging in there to find out where exactly the money is going. I think that our system generally is very opaque in terms of where money gets spent. And while I appreciate that, the Dún Laoghaire Down Council will have reduced the property tax by 15%. The real problem with the property tax in Dublin was that most of it was going down the country. It wasn't even coming into the coffers in the local authorities.
We don't even have certainty whether we're going to get 80% of the proceeds. That's not confirmed yet. Either.
I'm aware of this.
And there are those prohibitions. Yeah.
So
question that
they don't have control over taxation. There's limited spending powers, and they can be overruled by the county manager. So, and even fired by the Minister for the Environment. So local councillors have very little power in that respect. What they have is the soft power that Josepha was talking about, the lobbying power, the access to power,
the ability power, Shane. Which you were saying. I mean, you ran yourself to be a councillor, so it's the questioning power of the management. You're right, and the chief executive, as they're now called, as opposed to the manager, can make decisions overriding the council decision. You're quite right, but if there's enough councillors, and I can tell you, some of the councillors on the Dún Laoghaire right down are not shy in voicing their opinion. If there's enough people that who will ask the difficult questions. For example, we passed a motion about a feasibility study of all of the sites in the vacant sites in the constituency in relation to social housing, etc. We will then get those monies back. We'll see what the spend is. We can then say to the council, well, this is too much money, or why have you not housed people here? So you're right. I think it comes down to the integrity of each councillor, though, to push for that. If you sit back and just do nothing, well, then nothing's going to happen. So, the people that people elect as councillors is hugely important.
And of course, the other element is that, I mean, as a member of the council, you will have far more access to the media, so you'll have a louder voice, and you know, with the votes, you know, the people who gave you the first preferences, you can stand up there and say, well, I've had over 1,000 people stand up and support me and choose me from their peers. You know, those kinds of things do lend a certain credibility to an individual. So, I mean,
and just from your own point of view, Shane, now that the local campaign didn't work for you, do you have aspirations towards national politics in the next time out, or would you like to?
It would be
Great.
so difficult. I mean, local election, like I think the limit in spending was 13,000 in my ward. I didn't spend anything like that, but do a realistic campaign for a general election costs in the region of €30,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I have the ability to kind of come up with that kind
And
of
there would
money.
be no party that you'd feel comfortable going into in a general election situation.
There really isn't. I mean, I've made my decision on the parties already.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with the ones that are there. I know that the Rebel Alliance, or the RAS, as we
The
call
Reform
them,
Alliance, yeah, the RAS.
the RAS, we call them in Leinster House, are busy kind of trying to pull something together at the moment. But I don't know how credible that is, and that seems to be the only party which is forming. And to be honest, you know, a party which springs from the well of the most reactionary members of the most socially conservative party in the country probably isn't where my natural home would be.
And you don't see any party coming, being formed before the next election that might,
I'd love to
despite
see,
all
you
the
know,
rumour and speculation.
I'd love to see the likes of Stephen Donnelly kind of pull up his socks and start organising. But I don't think that's on the cards. So.
No.
In the
There's a lot of
absence of that-
speculation about him actually going. There was speculation about him before Christmas joining Fianna Fáil, in point of fact.
He pulled out of the banking inquiry too, didn't he?
He pulled out. Well, that's because of
a
the
separate
break.
issue. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's long been suggestions coming out of all kinds of quarters that he's going to jump into Fianna Fáil. I've seen no indication of that at all. And the way he organises himself, like, you know, he is a leader. You know, he has a very strong team underneath him. He works them all very, very hard. I don't think he'd be an easy fit within the party political structure.
Oh, I see.
I think he.
Just moving back to Dunleary, Josepha. We've talked about the situation with the court in Dunleary. Now, it's an ongoing story at this point in time, but I think it was last Monday. There's a lot of controversy surrounding the library.
Yes.
And actually, some residents, according to the Irish Times last Monday, are calling for it to be demolished. What's your view on
I
the?
know, yeah. And actually, when I was canvassing for the campaign, this is one of the biggest issues that I came up, you know, at the door, other than the obvious ones. And you know, it's very difficult when, as I said earlier, when you're looking in at the decisions that a previous council have made, and you can't justify them. I mean, 36 million, I think, was the cost of that library. I cannot understand why that decision was made, for many reasons. One is the architectural thing, and that's from a very sort of superficial level.
Well, that was Owen Keegan's decision, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Please, yeah.
You know, the size of it just isn't, you know, and that's just an aesthetic perspective. It's really kind of almost trivial in one way, but just looking at it, I think it's a bit of an eyesore. Second of all, you know, I mean, I'm a bibliophile, by the way. I'll preface it by saying that I love books. It's my favourite thing to do. But I don't think we need a library this size. Like, you know, I mean, especially when we're moving towards technology and people are reading on Kindles and everything. Why didn't we have, like, free parking in Dunleary or something? Or, you know, try and help actually the retail units in Dunleary. I cannot understand why this decision was made. Now, when I've made inquiries about it since I've been on the council, I've been told that at the time it was thought to have been a very good idea that this was proposed. We've only had one AGM, one council meeting and one special council meeting. So as yet, there has been no motion tabled in relation to the library in Dunleary and would have to be before any decision can be made to either, you know, destroy it or do whatever. But what would the cost of that be? Are we going to throw millions
after so
then
much money thrown
into,
in.
you know, so, and I think there's going to be offices in it for councillors. We don't need that. I mean, that's kind of nonsense in my view. So really, I suppose maybe at this stage it's too late to do anything about it. I mean, you know, if it's already been built. And,
it is the classic, you know, white elephant. I mean, my understanding of it was that the funding for it was attached to commercial development within the Dunleary down area, and that had they not spent the money, well, then the developers would have kept the money. They wouldn't have given that to the council. Therefore, they had to build something big and expensive in order to get rid of the cash. I mean, it's
Yeah, and there's so many other things that we could have spent,
The other
in
point
my
is
view, you know.
social housing. But
Yeah.
Mayor, it was apparently Owen Keegan too that actually.
Well, poor Owen Keegan seems to
before
be
he
going
left.
through the mill at the
But
moment.
we're going to talk about him in a moment. The other aspect of it too, I want to put, because I have a lot of councillors have been in this studio down the. Your attitude to Dún Laoghaire, Josepha, in terms of its problems now, the commercial problems. Some people are critical of the parking, some others aren't. Some are critical of the type of store, type of shop it's attracting. What's your opinion on this sort of downbeat attitude there is now to Dún Laoghaire?
Yeah, and there really is, and if you look at Howth, for example, or any of these towns that are on the coastline, they're thriving and vibrant, and Dún Laoghaire just has this cloud of, oppression about it or something. And taking the courthouse, of course, is going to really affect all the, bringing in money as well. So, I mean, there is BID, which is kind of the business, network, and they're trying to do this, marketing about Dún Laoghaire. I would have to look forensically, I think, about ways to bring more business into Dún Laoghaire, because it really is beautifully situated with the lovely harbour and the boats and everything else. But I don't know why people have.
Well, the argument is that this centre here vacuums up all the retail business in the area here, and
The Dundrum Centre.
Dundrum Town
Yeah,
Centre,
I mean, that could well be the case, I mean, I suppose as councillors, we can only look at what we can do to generate. Obviously, we have an alliance, Fine Gael, with Fianna Fáil and the Greens this time.
That's another point I want
to
discuss
and
with you
there were
as well,
7 days in negotiations. So, I mean, you think when you get elected that's just it and you can have a little rest. You don't. You go straight into negotiations. I wasn't part of the negotiating team because I'm only a lowly first-time councillor. So in the hierarchy, I come way down the line. So far. So that was the negotiation. We had an alliance with Labour for 10 years, but for many different reasons, their policies, if you like, didn't match ours. But I mean, one of the reasons I'm saying that is that in our alliance, we are saying that commercial rates need to be reduced. So that should help businesses.
So that's
as well.
a given, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it is really, and it's something that we had said before the election, and so we've come to an agreement about that, and it's about helping businesses and
well, it's not attracting, as other councillors in this studio have said, it's about attracting the type of business that people will go to shop in to Dún Laoghaire, which they're failing to do at the moment.
Yeah, and I wonder, is it something as simple as as you say, the Dundrum Town Centre has
the problem with
very highbrow retail units. Maybe it's bringing some of those into Dún Laoghaire.
I mean, it's a lovely shopping centre, but it's a terrible planning decision. Like what the Dundrum Shopping Centre has done is that it's hollowed out towns like Dún Laoghaire and also the city centre. When they were putting together the planning plans for Dundrum, they were using 2004 estimates of what Ireland's population would be like in 2020, not considering the fact that there would be a huge recession. So it was kind of the Mark Coleman, the best is yet to come vision of Ireland. And as a consequence, they overbuilt, and they built assuming there would be a population in the Dublin region of about 2.5 million. That isn't there, but they continued to build and continued to build and continued to build, and you get this hollowing out, and part of it has got to do with the incentives of local government, because when they're deciding commercial rates, they charge by square foot, so these kinds of structures are huge in terms of just simple space, and therefore they attract huge commercial rates, and it's in the incentive for local councils to build shopping centres, and we've seen it all across the country, where small towns are destroyed by a big Tesco on the edge of town.
And you could see it even in Stillorgan Shopping Centre, for example, where there was a period of time it looked very worn and down at heel, and then you have Starbucks came in and Donnybrook Fair came in, and next thing Kilkenny Design came in, and it's just generated a whole new business. So it needs a facelift, but I mean that money that was spent at the library, couldn't that have been put into the shopping centre or something?
I do believe that. But no, still, I want to stay with the point, because it does seem anyway that has been a precedent anyway from the point of view, because I lived in the States for many years, and again it was a case where these massive shopping malls were put in outside major towns, and the town was killed as a result of it. But just moving on to another point that you brought up there before, we talked about the retailing in the area, and this is this very surprising development where in many local councils around the country there's now an alliance between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Were you surprised that in Dublin?
Horrified.
Were you really?
Horrified to be in Fianna Fáil at all. And a lot of us had to swallow hard, for want of a better phrase, yeah. But, you know, I mean, it was quite uncanny, you know, from talking to the negotiators. As I said, I wasn't part of the negotiation team from all sides. But, you know, their policies were identically matched ours in every way. And, you know, some people... you know, again, the cynicism part of some councillors have said, oh, sure, they were so desperate to get into government, even at local level, that they would have agreed to anything, you know. But, you know, it is what it is, and you have to work together. It
has always been hard to distinguish the policy platform of Fine Gael from Fianna Fáil.
Well, let's just for 2 minutes, just before we wrap up on the local. I mean, going forward, do you see any alliance in the future at all? I mean, Shane's brought up a good point.
In national government.
Or even, you know, I mean, besides party members, many people outside the party outside the parties don't see a right difference between the two of you. How would sort of you distinguish, or how do you see it being different to Fianna Fáil, or being different to each other?
Well, I think we're far more ethical in many ways. You know,
less opportunity to be unethical. I think is the part.
To say that, yeah, you know, you do have a point. You know, in some ways, in terms of, you know, our policy making, and a lot of our decisions are very similar. But I think that Fine Gael is more for the average person out there on the street, and I just think that, you know, I could never be part of a party that has, you know, I'm not going to go over the litany of failures that Fianna Fáil have made for the last number of years, but I couldn't. I think there's a huge distinction between us from that perspective.
What was your reaction to the alliances around the country, Shane, as a matter of interest?
I think that the policies of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil run in parallel. I mean, the distinguishing factor between the two parties is not what they say they'll do when they get in there, but it's more of a tribal thing. It's you know, it's our people who get in, and then it's your turn for a while, and then it's our people who get in again. Like, if I were to look at the individuals who become politicians, successful politicians within the two parties, I think there tends to be more people from a professional background within Fine Gael, less so Fianna Fáil, and that's probably the biggest difference between the two.
We seem to mop up the mess that Fianna Fáil have made anytime we get into government. You know,
well, I mean, I mean,
the history so
traditionally
far.
speaking, the makeup of any town around the country was the church, Fianna Fáil, a church in Fianna Fáil, basically, wasn't it? So I mean, it was embedded within the country anyway.
Yeah.
And of course, you're forgetting the mess that Garrett's made in the 80s as well. I mean, we don't do good politics in Ireland. And by that I mean we don't do good professional policy-orientated politics in the country. It almost never happens. I think that what happens in Ireland is more that our civil service approaches government the way that the EU Commission approaches Parliament. You know, policy originates within the permanent government, moves from there to Parliament, where it gets tweaked and amended and then becomes real. If that is the case, then, you know, given that the two parties of government are Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, they tend to work within that complex, and actually their actions are indistinguishable. The big imponderable,
we were with Labour for 10 years.
The big imponderable,
you know,
the big imponderable in Irish politics is what would have happened had Enda Kenny won the 2002 general election. And if you look at the Fine Gael manifesto from 2005 for the locals, then I would be very surprised, you know, given what they indicated in that, if they had chosen attack which was not similar to what Bertie did under
Fianna
Fáil.
Fáil. Accept that now, Shane. I don't accept, because I just don't think that would. I mean,
what happens stamp duty?
But I mean, that's all hypothetical.
No. What happens stamp duty?
No.
So in the Fine Gael manifesto 2005, what was the plans to do? What was the Fine Gael plan to do with stamp duty?
Just briefly address that.
I don't know.
You don't? Okay.
No. I don't know.
It would have been to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Going forward, just would you be comfortable with an alliance, with a coalition? Perhaps general election?
It's not my decision to make.
Well, I mean,
first of all,
as a party member,
Brian,
as a councillor now, I mean, how do you view some sort of coalition?
Look, you know, politics of the political parties have their own manifestos, their own agendas, and there's always going to be that. But at the end of the day, as far as I am concerned, it's about bringing this country back. You know, we have already, you know, successfully got rid of the IMF, etc. But we want to see some money in people's wallets. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to down the line. Whatever government can achieve that, then yes. I don't see a difficulty with it, but it's not my decision to make. As I said, I'm not in national government, and that's not for me to say.
But would you if
it got the job done, I wouldn't be averse to it. No.
If the situation did present itself, and you were I mean, as a member, say after the next general election, which looks very much to be on the cards.
Yeah.
Would you be in favour of some type?
I wouldn't be averse to it. No.
Wouldn't be averse to it.
No.
Who is on the Dún Laoghaire West Down County Council, and Shane Keneally, who is a parliamentary assistant. The on-again, off-again situation with Gareth Brooks came to an end this week when he announced that Dublin was actually being cancelled. And the backer featured in the Oireachtas this week when a committee meeting was called on to investigate the booking. Shane, do you think was there a satisfactory outcome from the meeting?
All that happened was that rule of law prevailed over populism, which is no bad thing.
In terms of the planning permission?
Yeah, I mean,
council decision.
The law was clear. There were to be only 3 nights of concerts or other activities in Croke Park.
Yeah.
And the promoters, the GAA, went to this kind of sense that sure, it'll be grand. We'll figure it out. We'll bend the rules. It'll be fine. And then this is a terrible mess. So they figured that it would be okay, that we'd be able to squeeze past legislation.
It was 2 nights originally, wasn't it?
Well, they ran it. Yeah, they first sold 2 nights, and then 3 nights, and then 4 nights, and then 5 nights.
I think they had permission, didn't they, from the city council to do 2 nights?
There was no. Well,
informal.
It was informal. I mean, they'd previously run, I think, up to 6 nights in a year, which was already twice what they were ought to be doing.
Yeah,
they're doing 2 runs of 3 nights.
Well, 3 nights was one direction,
and then frankly, they took the piss. They figured we can get this through, and Owen Keegan. I'm not sure he dealt with this tremendously politically, but what actually happened, when you take a step back, and I know so many people around the country are hurting, and there's sheds full of cowboy hats that'll never get sold. What actually happened was that rule of law prevailed, and that's actually an exceptional thing in this country. Like, we're so comfortable with bending the rules. And this was another situation where people said, you know what, if we get 500,000 people on our side, the law won't matter. Well, the law did. That's the end of it. Now, it's not popular, but...
Shane raises a good point, because in his submission to the Oireachtas committee, Owen Keegan did say that it was the integrity of planning permission was at stake. And I mean, that's a good point that he made.
He does have a good point, and he is, I think, correct about that. I mean, I just think the whole thing...
integrity of planning laws, excuse me.
I just think the whole thing is just mortally embarrassing, for Ireland. And I hate saying Garth Brooks is to blame a bit as well, but I'm a big proponent of mediation. I think Kieran Mulvey, isn't it? I think he tried to mediate it, and offering 2 matinee shows, okay, wasn't what Garth Brooks wanted, and there was the 3 other shows, but it was a compromise in some way to try and sort of salvage something out of it. And now everybody's lost, so...
But between just the two of you, from the point of view of residents, I mean, the accusations have been made that the complaints sent in by residents apparently are people that have left the area, people that are dead. Nobody has verified the actual who the complainants are.
Yeah.
Surely that's a sort of a breakdown too in terms of...
it's almost a moot point at this stage, isn't it, Brian? How are they going to... What difference is it going to make at this stage?
It is irrelevant. I mean, if there are rules in place, then we shouldn't be blindly walking by. I mean, perhaps we need different rules. And that will be fine.
Well, the subject to licence part has to be looked at. Yeah. That's...
And they weren't able to apply for licences until 10 weeks before.
Yeah.
I think that's a terrible decision.
I think that whole licensing law needs to be changed. I mean, in the States, you have to have a licence before you can hold these concerts. So this is an opportunity to maybe do that and look at all of that and get some legislation in place, because,
But if the debate ought to be we need better rules, then that's the debate we should be having, not whether or not we should break the rules that we have.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah,
just to stay with Owen Keegan, who's the city manager, there's a screaming headline in today's Irish Independent where it says, "City Chief fights to save careers, Gareth Brooks Garth Brooks, excuse me, now dead in the water. Do you think is the job under threat, Shane?
It would be a remarkably political action for a fresh Minister of Environment to take to go and nail a city manager like that.
Yeah, but I think it's the GAA that are after him, actually.
Well, I mean, what can the GAA
Well, I mean,
do
who's
about
going
it?
to? I don't think his job. I don't think he lose his job. But who's going to pay? Somebody's going to sue somebody out
Well,
of
you see,
this.
the thing
There's
about-
Peter Aiken.
But the thing about it is, because apparently, according to this article, and I think we've heard this before, Peter McKenna, who's Croke Park Stadium director, apparently claims that he did contact Mr. Keegan, and I think Keegan is denying the fact that has denied any. Sources close to GA last night confirmed that Mr. Keegan is standing by his claims and is taking legal advice. Mr. Keegan has denied any assurance was given. So the point is that in this telephone conversation,
I think it was
McKenna's-
a huge cultural difference.
This goes back to politics again, doesn't it?
Well,
councillors and
my understanding is when they went about building Croke Park, okay, I think the Hogan stand was built before a contract was signed. They did it with SEAC was the developer on it, and it was done in this kind of handshake. We have an understanding. We'll work it out in the end. It'll be grand. And it wasn't.
It's very Irish. But I mean, in a way, Shane, when you were talking about, that in a sense, being a councillor, and I know you weren't really saying it in that starkly, but are powerless in some ways. This shows that the council does have power. You know what I mean, in terms of the Garth Brooks,
the executive.
And I think from I think in a strange way, the only good that will come out of this is that the Irish public will go, God, the people who we do appoint, or elect as councillors, can make a difference. Do you know what I mean?
I think the view that will be taken in this one will be that all those feckers up in Dublin don't understand how the world
there
works.
Is that too.
And the problem with Owen Keane is the legacy he's left behind in Dún Laoghaire, because I know from the point of view of what he was slightly perceived by as an Arthurian.
He's getting a really tough time at the moment. He is,
But I mean, it shows that if people are making decisions, they ought to be held accountable for them, and that's part of the problem with the chief executives or the city managers, whatever it's called now. Very often they are unaccountable for the actions that they take. They get promoted out of one position into another one. We saw John Tierney head off to Irish Water and bring the people who made the mess of Poolbeg with him into that. So
good.
If you are making if you're making decisions which affect people's lives, I think you ought to be held accountable for it. I think you ought to be fireable for it, and that's why I would have been a great supporter of the idea of a mayor of Dublin. And
well, that's another topic which we will discuss again at some other time. I want to move on because the government reshuffle was completed this week with the appointment of junior ministers and was regarded by many as a success, with the exception of new female junior ministers. Josepha, I've put this to you because you must be disappointed as a woman within Fine Gael that there's no junior minister.
I was surprised.
I was going to say into the cabinet, but brought into that arena, shall we call it?
I was surprised, Brian. But again, it's not for me to make these decisions, and there was a lot of media attention about that. And I saw Enda Kenny did make. As far as I recall, he gave a quote to say that he fully supports more female representation, at Parliament. So I think he's probably true. I mean, there is a lot of media attention about the geography of this reshuffle, both from the senior ministry and the junior ministry. So perhaps that was where he was coming from in relation to this, or it may simply be. I mean, this thing with the whole gender quota, for example, as well, it kind of, in a sense, comes back to this. And sometimes, and I'm not so much as feminist, but sometimes somebody has to be promoted from their credentials, not just because they're female, or male for that matter. So maybe we're looking at it kind of from the wrong perspective, that maybe the people that were promoted deserved to be promoted above and beyond the females. So I don't believe in tokenism, is what I'm trying to say. And it was great to see Heather Humphreys come in there.
I think
minister.
I think that is actually the problem that happened here. I mean, I think that what happened with women in cabinet and the juniors as well was actually tokenism. Like they kept three of the female ministers. They promoted Heather Humphreys from nowhere.
Well, she's a huge base down in Cavan Monaghan. From all reports now,
no.
She's a good.
I'm familiar with her, but in terms of cabinet experience into what's basically the softest cabinet position.
Well, it might be the arts now with the revolutionary decade coming along. It's going to be a tough one for her. So, I think
generally speaking, it's a ministry for fun.
Well, no, I wouldn't accept that.
Well, that's. I mean,
no, it's your title. Your views.
I am. So,
you are,
but just please allow me to express my view.
Okay.
That's all I'm suggesting.
Okay.
I think that with her promotion into the cabinet, that kind of let Enda off the hook. He's done his work for the women, and now he get to pick people on the basis of geography. I think that's kind of what happened. Myself, that would be my perspective on it, and that's the problem with tokenism, is that if you are just ticking boxes, right, there's 4 senior women now in senior positions, I don't have to worry about the women at this point, and now I just worry about the geography.
But it wasn't tokenism because there was only one. So
but there's 4 senior ministers who are women.
Yeah, but Frances Fitzgerald was already there, and so.
My suggestion is that the reason why more women were not promoted up to the system was because, on some level, Enda would have felt he's done his work to the women at this point.
Well, I suppose we don't know the workings of his mind. I don't really.
Well, you're positing that it was entirely about geography.
No, I'm saying that the media was. I didn't say that. I said the media are saying that. What I'm saying is that I think, and I would like to think, and I don't know, neither of us know what Enda Kenny was thinking, but I would like to think that he promoted people on their credentials, and even as a woman,
like Joe McHugh.
But even as a woman, arguing against myself,
what
are Joe? I do want to see a woman elected.
Joe McHugh.
That's what I'm saying.
And I'm against quotas entirely.
We're singing on the same hymn sheet about that.
Joe McHugh was Minister for Gaelic. Just want to, and he has very sparse knowledge of the Irish language, which is.
But he will be running a 5-seater with a large Gaelic area.
Most meetings are in English, I believe.
But to be fair to Heather Humphreys, like Simon. And his name now,
Harris.
Thank you.
Yes,
has been a fairly good grafter within the constituency. So this was from the point of view of giving her an incentive to keep going.
Well, what impressed me with Simon was his work on the PAC. He's on the Public Accounts Committee, and he was being a very, very strong worker.
And
there.
he took on the challenge of the MEP.
But we saw yesterday in the Shannon, he was in taking amendments on an AMA bill. Mm-hmm. 2 days after picking up a junior portfolio, he was sent in there to read stuff off a list that was handed to him by a civil servant. Why they didn't call the summer break at that point and let him actually read into his brief was a mistake.
So would it be?
But I think he is a competent individual. With Heather Humphreys, my abiding memory of her was when she turned up in a fur coat, her brand new fur coat, on the day that the carers are outside Leinster House.
I doubt it was real fur.
No, it was. It was beautiful.
Really, I'm shocked.
Down to the ankles.
You're not
really?
happy with the appointment
Honestly,
anyway.
well, she doesn't strike me as the type now to be going around fur coats, but I'll take your word for it, Shane. She's a very hard worker from what I hear, anyway.
But it does give a fresh brush to the image of the government anyway. I think at the moment.
And I'd like to think Enda Kenny, he did elevate her in a sense, and I know what you're saying from kind of nowhere, as in that she hadn't a previous portfolio, but I think he promoted her on her credentials as opposed to her gender.
Well, I think it's also the Cavan Monaghan problem in terms of the next election.
It
needed some kind of ministry,
geographic as well, obviously as well, and my goodness, my names are. Pascal Donoghue as well has been promoted, but then he has worked very well as well from the point of view of the.
Yeah, he replaced Lucinda, and he did a lot of running for Enda during the Shannon election last year as well.
Let's move on. Anglo Irish was back in the news yesterday with the Irish Independent releasing more tapes featuring conversations with some of its leading bosses. The conversations seemed to indicate that they wanted to keep the board ignorant to what senior manager was up to. But from a listener's point of view, it must really anger many people and leave them very cynical. Again, reminders of what happened prior to the last general election. Again, but we're going back to this,
I was glued. When the Anglo tapes came out first, I was glued to it. I just couldn't. You'd be going to bed angry, after listening to some of those tapes. And I know one of the people involved. But that's neither here nor there, and that upset me even more because it was the kind of I think what first came out in those tapes was just the arrogance, and even after, the bank guarantee, they were still making jokes, and Angela Merkel even had to step in, and when she heard them joking about singing Deutschland über alles, and I don't know what, again, not trying to see the silver lining because there isn't really a silver lining, but I hope that when these awful things come out, that people learn from them, you know.
Yeah, but I think that Shane, I'll bring you in on this, is the fact that still nobody has been, we had the court case down in the district courts there. Nobody's brought to book over these situations at all. And the fact is that they really effectively were trying to do a snow job on the board as well, these senior management figures.
Yeah, I mean, the most disappointing performance about all this was I think, Patrick Neary in the dock. During the court case, 84 occasions he didn't remember, he couldn't recall. That's disgraceful.
Yeah.
This was a man who was a career civil servant who attended meetings all of his lives, and I think what happened was that he knew when not to ask questions. He knew not to pick around things that he didn't want to know about.
Of course, he's been the regulator of banks at the time as well, who had been constantly accused of being asleep at the wheel, isn't that correct?
And someone whom they were openly mocking during the... in the Anglo tapes.
Yeah, I mean, they were paid an awful lot of money for doing very little, as far as I can see, and it was just this air of untouchability, and complacency.
Well, they were right. I mean,
and it was that was the culture, and
but also the law. I mean, the difficulty with jailing these people is not that they didn't do anything wrong or that people aren't unhappy with them or whatever. It's just that the laws are so poor that we can't actually nail them for anything.
Yes, indeed. Just want to move on because little can be said about the suspected shooting down of a civil airliner yesterday over Ukraine when a Malaysian Boeing 777 was apparently hit by a ground-to-air missile. It's a shocking new development in international terrorism, if it's indeed true that it was shot down. Your reaction?
Well, who shot it down? That's what.
Apparently,
that's what I'd like to know.
Yeah,
I mean, there's according to reports, there's
280
280 passengers and 15 crew on board.
Which another 3 infants as well. I think it was 298 is the total.
After 2 or 3 months after the disappearance of another Malaysian.
Yeah, which kind of puts a question mark over that now, doesn't it?
It does.
Because you may have thought that was just an accident. But
well, I'd say that they would be completely unrelated given the geographical distribution of the two differences. Another element to it was that flying an hour behind was the Prime Minister of India, and it could have been his plane who would have been taken down.
It's frightening.
Oh, well, India's a nuclear
Although
power.
Each individual's life doesn't matter if you're the Prime Minister. Every life is,
of course,
but I know what you're saying.
But even and a terrible thing to weigh up different lives. There were 107 AIDS researchers on that flight. They're flying to the AIDS 2014 conference.
A preeminent researcher
in Melbourne.
Well.
So I'm amongst the best and the brightest who were fighting that scourge are now dead.
Well, apparently the UN Security Council is holding an emergency meeting tomorrow at 10 in the Ukraine. So hopefully something.
Yeah, and I'm sure that meeting will accomplish tremendous things. I mean,
the cynical.
We hope.
No, I understand. Totally understand what you're saying. Yeah,
I have friends who are Ukrainian. I have a friend who's desperately trying to naturalise here. Her father's from Mariupol. Her grandmother's still there.
Yeah. And going to Medjugorje in August.
Well, we must. Those the victims of those two that have been the people that
what's happening there
relatives of victims
is appalling. I think the Russians' behaviour in this has been disgraceful.
Yeah.
And very dangerous. And I think the EU is currently showing the cowardice that it did in advance of what happened in the Balkans. That's the other point that
President Obama now is trying to put pressure on the Europeans to take some action over this now as well. That's the latest this morning as well.
But I was just so sad.
Yes. It is very sad. Yeah, absolutely. Now, yesterday the Dáil closed for the summer break, but before it did so, Senator Ned O'Sullivan sent a warning that seagulls were attacking people in Dublin, and he was gravely concerned about the situation. Josepha, have you been attacked yet?
No, I haven't been attacked. I don't get time to go walking where seagulls are because I'm always working.
There's a lot around the Dáil.
Brian. No, I shouldn't laugh, and I know Ned O'Sullivan, and it's nothing to do with Fianna Fáil because there are Fine Gael senators who say equally, if you like, not daft things, but I mean, I have to admit that I did canvass quite strongly to abolish the Senate, and I'm not afraid to say that. And for those who voted to keep the Senate, I hope they're reading the papers, because really, there's much more important things that need to be discussed.
Well,
maybe
we all
maybe
thought
there.
that, sorry, please finish. Yes. Please finish. No, sorry, I've interrupted you.
He did say, however, and I didn't hear the Joe Duffy show, but he did say that there were a lot of calls about seagulls attacking children, stealing their lollipops, and all this sort of thing.
It hasn't been verified.
It hasn't been verified.
I know, Shane, you're working on Dáil all the time, and apparently there's seagulls attacking the...
Part of the parochialism of Irish politics. Kerry men coming up here giving out about our birds. No, look, the what happens in the Shannon, also happens in the Dáil. There are an awful lot of passengers who are sitting in parties.
And some very good senators too.
Some very good senators as well. But I mean, the Senate does actually accomplish some things. So, over the last week, I worked for John Crown, and we were successful in changing the
one of my favourite senators.
The GP contracts bill was because the HSE was putting in gagging clauses against GPs, which is something that GPs had great concern about, and it was only because the margins were so tight in the Shannon that we were actually get this.
That's
true, but we did, and we were successful. So I mean, we do get some marginal successes within the Shannon.
And in fact, can I just very quickly, Brian, I just wanted to say that I did canvass to abolish the Senate, but I have a lot of time for a lot of the individuals. John Crown being one, he was my dad's oncologist, and I really respect the work he does in anti-smoking. Sapone, Catherine Noon, there are some very good senators in there. But you're right, there are a few passengers.
Just put on your headphones, please, because we're going to turn our attention to the United States now, as it looks as if we're getting closer to the appointment of a UN ambassador to Ireland. To tell us more of the appointment and the process, are you okay then? Can you manage it? To tell us more of the appointment and the process that he has to go through, on the line is the chairperson of Democrats Abroad, TJ Malloy. Thanks for joining us, TJ.
How you doing, Brian?
I'm good. So tell us, what's the name? What's his name? What's his background? And what's the process that this gentleman has to go through to come to Ireland?
Kevin Effelmel is his name. He was a U.S. attorney with the U.S. Justice Department. Did some time out in Los Angeles, and then back in St. Louis. Member of the American Bar Association, served on some committees on Central European law, stuff like that. And his grandparents are from Westport County, Mayo, close to my heart, as my parents are from Ackle Island County, Mayo. He went through the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing a few days ago. It seems to have gone off without a hitch, and he looks like he'll get nominated. It just depends on how fast the Senate wants to go on actually confirming him on. And there's a few dozen ambassadors actually in line right now. Just have to be voted on.
And is there any danger now of the Tea Party or any element within the Senate playing politics with this because it's long overdue at this point?
I don't see anything playing politics with him individually. There's playing politics with confirming the ambassadors, period, of any country. It's the do-nothing Republican Party. It's how they've been operating since this president came along, and it looks like they're going to continue that way. They will confirm these guys. It looks like it's on the long finger, but I think it'll be. I can't say sooner rather than later. I don't even know what later is anymore. So I'd say hopefully by September.
I as far as I can see from listening, he sounds like a very competent man. He seems to have Irish links. He seems to understand the Irish and American.
He's devout Catholic, I believe, as well. Right?
Yeah, and obviously I have Westport Mayo blood in me, so going to support
Shane,
that.
Do you want to make any comment on all of this?
Well, 3 years is a very long time to be without a US ambassador here. The big problem, of course, for US ambassadors is that much of their entertaining budget has to come out of their own pocket, and Ireland is a particularly expensive place to be an ambassador because of the whole Irish-American cultural aspect. So I think one of the problems that we had was just simply finding someone who wanted to be our ambassador, because it really is something which hurts the individual. They got to put it out of their pocket.
I want you to address that point very quickly, TJ, but I just should remind listeners too, you're listening to, on the panel today is Councillor Josepha Madigan and Shane Keneally. Do you want to address that point very quickly, TJ?
Well, I'm unsure on the remuneration or entertainment budget, but the Rooney's obviously a very well-to-do family, and I was out there on 4th of July a couple times, and they put on a great spread, and that was all sponsored. And it's the connections with the National Football League.
But in terms of 3-year gap that Shane has brought up, I mean, any reasons for that at all? Or?
I think people weren't vetting well, is what we were hearing. The people they were bringing forward were just, it's a pretty rigorous process, and if you're not squeaky clean, even if that skeleton in the closet is a small one or an insignificant one, if you're the head of, say, a big city in the United States, it's something the Senate will frown upon. So that's what we were hearing. It's hard to know. A lot of people may have turned it down for many reasons.
And tell us now, if it does go through smoothly, when do you think he will be on Irish shores?
I mean, my best guess is September-ish. But Brian, this is entirely the Senate is the U.S. legislative branch is in such turmoil. The Republican Party does not want to do anything. Do not want to do a thing. It's
As midterm elections as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all political posturing for midterm elections. So it's like this is just one more finger in the eye of the administration. I mean, they just do not want to do anything. It's really pathetic. I mean, I'm sorry to say. I mean, it makes me long for a parliamentary system.
We've got a few minutes left, TJ, because there's another story that has been ongoing, and this is the story of the problems at the border with returning immigrant children. We covered this last week with Larry. There seems to be a problem now between Irish-American Martin O'Malley, who's a Maryland governor, and who's going to possibly go into the presidential run against, we would think at this point, Hillary Clinton. He's got a beef with President Obama. Can you tell us more about that?
He basically said that we shouldn't be deporting children back to certain deaths, which we're not going to be doing anyway. Obama's just looking for the authority. Right now we have the authority to turn children back from Mexico after just a short hearing. That authority does not exist for the countries south of Mexico. So basically Honduras and El Salvador, lots of kids coming from there, lots of minors. The numbers were about 20,000 up until about 2011. This year we're looking at 80,000 children. 80,000 children coming across the border. The Immigration Service, the Border Patrol, they can't house these kids. I mean, and there's a lot of gang violence going on in Honduras and El Salvador. That's a big reason this is happening. Republicans are playing politics again. They just want to change. Obama just wants to change the law to the law that applies to Mexican children. If you're in serious danger, we let you stay. If you're not, you're just taking advantage to try and come into the country legally. You have to go back. So he just wants to change the law to what President Bush signed in 2008. But Republicans are blaming Obama for he can't be trusted on immigration. This administration is deporting 1,000 people a day from the United States. 365,000 people a year are being deported from the United States.
I just want to, because before we wrap up, Josepha, what do you think? What is your take on all this controversy in relation to the immigration and all the problems you hear about?
Well, I mean, I hope that the children are being treated humanely, in with due process, and I don't know how that's. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just. It's shocking to hear unaccompanied children crossing over and being turned back.
30 seconds, Shane.
Yeah, no, I unfortunately they're being held in camps down in southern Texas, which is no place to be placing children. And I saw a disgusting article this week about how these immigrants are a risk of infection and bringing measles and the like into the States. It is
a bad situation. I have to leave it there, I'm afraid, for today. That's it for today's show. I want to thank Fine Gael Councillor